Good morning. You're listening to the BLAINESWORLD Show. They can be found each week on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and you can find us as well at my website, which is behind me, blainesworld.net. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. And each week we focus on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce Joseph Reed Hayes, who's an award-winning playwright. Before we talk about anything more about your background, Joseph, why don't you wave to all your fans and friends who are watching this? So if you're watching it, that's Joseph Reed Hayes. He's been writing for the stage since 2002, with more than 16 plays and many short spoken word works on his disposal. He has had 67 productions and readings in front of live audiences from coast to coast and in 4 countries. And we'll use that to jump right in, Joseph, to the fact that you're going to be actually having 2 plays running in Asheville next month. Is that correct?
That's right. That's
Okay.
right. Practically at the same time.
And what you told me was so cool, like what you said off the air, that if you can do it, anybody can do it, and just, but we'll talk about that in a second. But before we do, let
Yeah.
me ask you, as a kid, I was like finding out where people grew up and what they did as a kid. Where'd you grow up?
I was born and raised in the Bronx, New York.
Well, New York City boy too.
That's right.
So
Yes.
I was also not in the
Okay.
Bronx, New York City. And
hmm
so as a kid growing up in the Bronx, and that's where you were raised for most as a child,
That's right. That's right.
did you always know you wanted to be an award-winning playwright?
Yes, of course. I was born going, give me my award. I always had the idea that I wanted to be a writer. I sort of called myself a writer long before I actually was. But I always liked writing and always had that imagination that an ADD kid does. You focus on many, many different things all at the same time, and you also absorb. So it's the absorption of things around you, what people say, what they do, that really fuels all of my work. So
That-
from a kid, yes, I've been paying attention.
That's interesting. So as a Bronx boy, you didn't want to play for the Yankees?
No, I was never into sports. In
Okay.
fact, my father dragged me to ball games several times and I couldn't bear it. I wanted to be out as soon as possible.
That's
I
funny. The
lived in my
last
brain.
reminds me Yankee Stadium. The last football game I ever went to, and I never went since, was 1961. 7 degrees, 40-mile winds. A playoff game. I said never go to a game again. You couldn't pay me. The same kind of thing. And then the Bronx, you bring up old memories. NYU Uptown. My first girlfriend was
hmm
NYU Uptown, and and
Okay.
and Jan's. Remember Jan's?
No, where was
That,
that?
that, that was an ice cream place in
Okay.
whatever, fond memories. So when did you start writing seriously?
I started, I moved to Florida 30 years ago and I needed a job. And so I looked at the newspaper and saw that they weren't really covering the neighborhood that I was now living in. So I called the local editor and I said, I don't see any news about my neighborhood. They said, well, we don't really have a writer there. I said, you do now. I pitched them 6 story ideas. They bought 4, and that was my career.
Now, story ideas, what kind of stories were they?
Covering anything, really. I enjoy interviewing people and finding out why they, much like yourself, why they do what they do, how they got to do it, and little tiny tidbits. Um, I have this ability to drag information out of people. And I can't tell you how many times I heard someone say, why am I telling you this?
Well, I'm a little disappointed though. I'm seeing where you're at there, and I don't see a frame your first check. I don't see, was that from your Florida days? Did you actually get paid for that? That was your first,
Oh, always get paid.
okay.
Blaine, always get paid.
But that was the first time though you'd written and got published and paid for that?
That I really could consider myself a writer.
Okay, very
Soon
exciting.
after I printed my first business cards, it said writer on it.
Okay, but you didn't keep that check though, right?
I
You
didn't
spent it
keep the check.
eventually.
I'm not even sure there was a physical check. It's hard to tell. It's hard to
So
remember.
transition, if you would then. So you in
Yes.
Florida, certain. when you went to school, you thought you were going to be what?
I
Did you
went
have
to
any
sc-
ideas?
I have a degree in English,
Okay.
so it was what I did best. What I was going to do with that afterwards was not something that came up in conversation, but I love words and always have.
So you started writing stories. How did you transition from stories to plays?
Thank you so much for that question.
Okay.
I'll try to keep it brief, but there is a place called the Atlantic Center for the Arts in New Smyrna Beach, Florida. And it's an artist's residency where three groups of people go and stay at this place. It's in the swamp pretty much for 3 weeks working with a master artist. There's always a writer, there's always a visual artist, and there's always a musician. And I went there in 2000 and worked with a writer called Douglas Copeland, who is a Canadian poet and novelist. And after the 3 weeks, you get together, you work with a group of 10 people, and you work during the day. And then I would run across and hang out with the musicians at night. It was great. It was the life I always wanted to lead. After the 3 weeks, you sit down and say, well, how did you enjoy the experience? What did you think? What did you get out of it? And Mr. Copeland said to me, you're a short story writer, and that's all well and good, but what I get out of your writing is you should write plays. And those 4 words changed my life.
Wait, is he still around?
Yes, he is.
Okay, send him. We'll make sure he gets a copy of this tape because
Yes,
that's
yes.
very exciting that
Yeah.
you remember it, but you still give him credit for it. So
Oh, of course.
he was
He
the
he
one.
did he did change the way I thought about words and about what I could do. I've been working in theater since I was 14, but always as a tech, always an audio guy, and very proud of that. It never occurred to me that I could actually create the work that was on stage instead of supporting it and making it producible. So 6 months after that declaration of words, I had a play in front of a paying audience, and I've never looked back.
Wow, 6 months. What
Yeah,
was that? What was that first play?
it was a play called A Little Crazy. It was about an 80-year-old Jewish Russian man who goes to live with his grandnephew in New York because he's dying. It's a comedy.
Is it was it a comedy?
Yes,
So not familiar with that. Has that been done elsewhere aside from that first time?
I have been very successful with that. It's been produced in Canada, in Washington State, in California. I've actually done it a couple of times myself. I like to produce my work. When I first write it, I like to see if it works in front of an audience. So very often I will put it on myself.
Now,
Let's put on a show. I get a barn and I put on a show.
and we get Judy and Mickey, and we're all set.
If they're in town, yeah.
But what's interesting about what you do, so you not only write the play, you produce it, and then
Mm,
I know in upcoming in Nashville, you're going to be directing it as well.
yes.
Do you typically do all those things?
I usually don't direct. I try not to direct, mostly because I don't know that language. There are things that directors can tell actors that bring out things that I might not even think about. So when I'm directing for one reason or another, I rely very much on my actors for their instincts and their insights and for their suggestions about where it can go. And sometimes I say, yes, absolutely, thank you. And sometimes I say, no, that's not where I want it to end up. And we work from there. It's very much a collaborative effort for me.
Have you ever acted in any of your plays?
I am not an actor. When I have attempted to be an actor, I'm terrible at it. And mostly because, again, because I'm attention deficit, I can't remember the script, even if I wrote it. It
Well,
would be a disaster.
the key, and I'm like that too, and off the air, I'll tell you a story about that. But it's like you said you can't remember the words. The nice thing though, what you should do, Joseph, is write a one-person play because then if the lines get screwed up, nobody knows. So that's that's the key. Because I'm always amazed by people who do one-person plays. Your
Mhm.
plays, how many people are typically in your plays?
They can be one person. They can be, I produced a play a couple of years ago that had 9 people in the cast. Generally, they're smaller because I love intimate theater. And I love little spaces like 35 Below, where the audience is so close to the actors that they could see their eyes. They could see what's happening on their faces. And the audience can realize this is not just a little figure off in a distance in a stage. This is a human being with emotions, and the impact of that is remarkable. And I
Now,
like that.
now you mentioned, so that's pretty cool. After that thing in Florida, you put together a play within 6 months, which is amazing.
Hmm.
Um, is that still in existence, that the thing in Florida you mentioned?
Oh, yes, very much so.
Yeah.
I think they run about 8 sessions a year.
Wow. It's a shame
Yeah.
that I don't know that they have anything like that in North Carolina. Have you heard anything?
I'm unaware. I honestly can't say.
But what a great opportunity for works to be
Yes.
discovered.
Yeah.
And so after that, you write the first play, get it produced within 6 months. Take me, what happened after that?
More plays, more
More plays?
places. Yes. I've written 17 plays. Um, so figure it out. If I've been doing this for 22 years and I have 17 plays and they've all been produced numerous times, I try to keep busy. So it happens. It happens a lot. I've done 4 plays in 1 year. I did a project that I called 13 and 13, where I did 13 events in the year 2013 because that's how my mind works. So we had 4 plays, we had 5 jazz shows, an art exhibit, a movie screening, workshops. That's what I do. So having 2 shows in a month is sort of like,
Well,
it's
I'm fascinated by
normal.
the process, Joseph. If you would talk about your writing process, if you would. Do you sit down every day and write for 3 hours, starting at 7 o'clock in the morning? How do you write?
I I know I don't I don't have that kind of discipline. What I do is I wait for inspiration. First of all, there's no such thing as writer's block. That's an excuse, which I learned from being a freelance writer. When somebody says, "Write this piece for me," you better write it. You can't wait for the muse to strike. But what I do is wait for the idea to come to me, and I'm really lucky in that I've got 6 plays in my head right now. So they're just waiting to they're next in line. I don't write every day. I write when I suppose when I feel like it, but I feel like it a lot.
And so when you're writing, um, are you ever writing several things at once?
I try not to. That's a little confusing. Um, I try to focus on one at a time.
I've always wondered too, that after you come up with a play, especially after
Hmm.
it's been produced, do you ever
Hmm.
change it or edit it, modify it?
Oh, sure, constantly. The 2 shows that I'm doing right now, one was written 8 years ago. The other was written about 5, 6 years ago, and I'm a different person now. And life is different, and the world is different. And so when I look at the play as it was written or produced originally, things change. Words come that didn't come before. The juxtaposition of the events and the actions and the words change because I'm not that person from 8 years ago anymore. So every time I look at a play, in fact, every time that it's on stage, pardon, I want to change it.
Now, these two have actually been produced before and
Yeah, they
shown
have.
elsewhere.
Yes.
And since we're talking
Yeah.
about them, Joseph, let me jump right into it. The fact that you're doing two, again, I haven't heard about this in the Asheville area, but you're doing two
Mm,
plays, especially two of your plays in the same month. Let's take them
yes.
one at a time. What's the first play opening?
In fact, they're both in rehearsal in my house right now.
Oh,
I
that's what.
did one. I did one this morning. Yes. So the 2 plays, the first play that comes up on July 12th and runs Friday, Saturday, Sunday for those 2 weekends is called A Slow Ride. It's about 3 women, 3 generations of the same family, taking their monthly bus ride to see the house where they started their lives, where they grew up in. It's It's a play about the tensions and dynamics of three generations of any family confined in a bus for a long period of time. It's about memory and relationships and just the fact that you'll get tired of your family and you want to tell them about it. What's interesting about this piece is that these three women are so in their own space, they're in their own triangle, that is their world, that they are having rather intimate discussions and conversations about life, about sex, about what they want to do and not want to do, and they're on a public bus.
So the whole thing is set on the bus?
On the bus.
Okay.
Yes.
And I talked about it, I think, off the air, but describe where it's going to be, because I think it's like a perfect place for this show to be done. And talk a little bit
Hmm.
about the setting, or 35 below.
35 Below, it's a lovely little, what they call a black box space. We literally have 40 seats for performance. So it is very tight and very intimate. And we are setting up the stage so that it is portraying a bus and the depot rather, outside the bus and what happens in between those two spaces.
If I could ask you, who are going to be the three actors in that one?
Yes, you can very much ask. Laura Berry is playing Jezebel, who is the grandmother. Susan Hudson is Rita, who is the daughter. And Jennifer Russ is Susan, who is the mom in between. She is the keeper of, hopefully, all the peace. She carries around a lot of bags because she wants to be prepared for anything that could happen, will be in one of her bags. And therefore, she's carrying all the baggage.
And I get a chill when you mention Jennifer, because she's one of my favorite, not only people, but actors. And
Uh-huh.
so people in for a treat. I just think she's magnificent in anything I've ever seen her in.
Oh,
So
thank you for saying that.
no, I'm so glad you were able to cast her.
Yeah.
But let me ask you
Yeah.
this: when you came in, did you do the casting, or did somebody help you
I
with the casting?
I did the casting. I had a lot of people give me suggestions, and to be very honest, I don't have all of their names in
No,
front of me
I don't
to
need it.
tell
Yeah,
you, but I do. There's a place here, I'm sure you know, called Story Parlor,
yeah, sure.
and they have a first Thursday open mic night. And I found that very soon after we moved here, mostly because it's right down the hill from our house in West Asheville. And so I've been going there and taking a 5 minute spot during that open mic and just reading pieces of my plays. There's a lot of pieces. I could do this for a very long time and getting the feel of the Asheville audience. And they are so open and so ready to receive interesting art that that's been my sort of rehearsal hall for all kinds of things. And there are several people connected to Story Parlor that gave me some suggestions or who to talk to so that I could talk to other people. And that's really where I got all of my casting, was from
So
talking to other people in the community. I
now
knew no one.
you raised an interesting point in terms of coming from Florida, and I'm curious from your perspective. Theater is What are the differences then between theater in Florida and theater in Asheville, or are there differences?
I can tell you about the differences between theater in Orlando because that's where I was. And there are some interesting positive things about having a pool of actors and musicians in Orlando, and that is the theme parks.
Right.
That's why they're there. So, some world-class musicians, some extremely good actors who are really hungry to do work that's not connected with the same script 10 times a day. So I was very lucky to be able to have that pool. And I could put on a play and put out word and I could get cast immediately. When we came to Asheville, this was not the case. And so I had to work at finding people to do these plays. And the advantage of Asheville is that the people who are doing theater here want to do theater. They're not doing it as something else to do while they're getting a paycheck. And I would have to say that the actors in Asheville are hungrier. They
That's
want
interesting.
to
Really?
they want to do the best job possible. And the six people that I have in these two plays are extraordinary. I am amazed constantly at how good they are, how quick they pick up, and how much they bring of their own selves to these parts. I'm really, really lucky.
Instead, I think you point out a real interesting thing about Asheville is that, yeah, there are just a lot of people, not only these six, but a lot of other really good actors in Asheville.
Hmm.
And just like I said, I know the one really well that's in your show, but all of them are just really fine. So when you were casting the two shows, aside from being a solo storyteller, did you have auditions or how did you cast them?
I did with them what I'm doing with you right now. I hopped on Zoom. I put out some audition notices on Facebook and other places, and people responded, and we did this. And I just wanted to see where the chemistry was. There's some advantages to this because we're really close right now. I
Right.
could see what's happening in your eyes. And I cast a couple of people purely because of what they were doing with their eyes.
Interesting, because
Yeah,
the other advantage too is a lot easier and convenient for people too, that they don't have to
absolutely.
come a
Yeah.
cattle call at 10
The
o'clock in the
cattle
morning,
call, right.
but that's
Hmm.
great.
Yeah.
So the first play sounds cool. What's the second one?
The second play is called Destination Moon. It is the story of Truly, who is a young woman who has spent a great deal of her young life in and out of hospitals. She has an undisclosed illness. Doctors can't find a name or a reason for it. They just know and have told her that she really shouldn't plan for a future because she won't have one. So she spends time in her room in the hospital speaking to a late night jazz radio DJ called Doc Miller. They strike up this relationship of two little people inside their two little rooms, isolated from the world. All they have, in many ways, are these conversations, are the things that they talk about, which is their obsessions, probably books, music, their lives, their past. We don't plan about the future because Truly doesn't think she has one, except when we meet her, she's just been told by the doctors, we don't know how it happened. We don't really know what you had, but as far as we can tell, you're cured. You'll get to go home. And she doesn't know what to do with that information because it's never been part of her life.
So I understand I have the two people in it. Who's the third
Yes.
act? Oh,
The
who are they?
third
A third character. Yeah.
The third character is what I've been calling the voice. As I'm sure you know from radio and from live radio, sometimes there's a person that plays you in and out of a commercial. And this is that character. It's a musician who has had this long-term relationship with this DJ, but all this person does is play the music, play the ads, and goes out. And in this case, um, I'll tell you something about the cast. Truly is being played by Evan Brooks, who I understand has an incredible reputation in town. This young person who has played a lot of different things and is sharp and quick as anyone I've ever met. Doc Miller is played by Corey Harper, who brings this sort of southern aspect to this character that I never planned on because we're in Asheville. And then the voice is a brilliant musician called Taza McDonald, who is bringing his own material to this play. So when we do the commercial breaks, the songs, and there are about 5 songs in here, are his. And he's tailoring them to what's happening in the play. So when we have this story about unrequited love, he brings in a love song. And when we're doing something fast and jazzy, he's there with that kind of material. It's an interesting spread across 3 very different talents, I think, and they work extremely well in this play.
What a great opportunity for him, though, to be in this play. Had he ever been in a play before?
He did some music for a
Okay.
production of Romeo and Juliet, but don't, I'm not really sure if he's acted before. And he's a natural. He's great.
Now talk about the process too, in terms of people seeing this, realizing how much time you put into it. In other words, one of the reasons I love live theater is
Hmm.
because you're only doing it 2 weekends, but people
Right.
don't realize you've been at this for how long now, just putting these 2 shows on?
Just these two shows. We
Yes.
started a month and a half ago. We've been rehearsing 4 times a week, something like that.
Okay.
Sometimes I'm doing two rehearsals in the same day. It's an interesting thing.
That's a lot of work to put into do a
It
show
is.
live.
Hmm.
So I so encourage people to see it because you're only going to do 6 shows of it. It's almost
That's
too
right.
bad, and only 40 seats. And I will
Right.
mention to folks that the nice thing about where you're doing it is that every seat's a good seat, but
Oh yeah.
you got to get there early. I mean, you got to buy tickets early because with only 40 seats, it
Hmm.
doesn't have a long run.
That's true.
In terms of people getting seats, again, we mentioned only
Hmm.
40 seats. How do they get
Hmm.
them, Joseph?
Well, there's two very easy ways of doing it, and one is to go to my website, which is hayesplays.com. No, I don't have it up behind me. Um, if anybody wants to put their phone up to their screen and get the QR code, you can go
And I
there.
still hate doing
Um,
that. Go ahead. Yeah.
or go to the Asheville Community Theater website and ashevilletheater.org, and you can pick up tickets there.
And we should mention too, they spell theater correctly, right? Is that the way, how do they spell it?
Depends on your definition, I
No, but
suppose.
how does
It's
Asheville Theater spell it?
Theatre.
Right. That's how I spell it now, but just
Okay,
okay.
now.
No, I have been for the most part.
All right.
So tickets, and Joseph, again, if you would, when's that show running, the dates, the second show?
The second show is July 26th through August 4th, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So
Okay.
the evening shows are at 7:30, and the Sunday shows are at 2:30.
And let me put you on the spot on this one. In terms of, I guess, both shows, who should be seeing them, or who are they geared for? Or who would you recommend to watch it?
I would think that probably someone under 16 might be boring, but and bored by these shows. But then again, there's a character in each of these plays that are 16,
Oh,
17
they're
years old
okay.
for the purposes of the show. Um, it might be interesting for them to see them. I wouldn't limit this to anyone. I think people who love theater, who love words, who love music, this would be a show for. I get a lot of reactions from people who will say, that's my mother. She's going through that. I did that with my daughter just yesterday. Uh, so I try to write as if you are overhearing a conversation, so that most of the time it is real life. It is real and natural and accurate. When I do get into a poetic, or what people have termed a lyrical part of the show, it is raises above that. I love words. I use a lot of them. So it's a task, it's a challenge to actors to do my plays, and I'm grateful for them when they do.
And after these 2 shows are complete in early August, do you have anything else in the works that you can share?
I don't have anything here. These shows were almost a surprise to me. From the day that we arrived in Asheville, I was looking for a space because I can't go a year without producing a show. I did a show during lockdown and COVID. I did it online, but I have to have a place working. So after this, I've got some ideas. I think it depends on finding a space. And as everyone in theater here knows, that's a challenge. So we'll see what happens. I've got a lot of plays. I've got a lot of plays in the works and up here. So something will happen. I just can't tell you what it is yet because I don't know.
And the shame you just mentioned it was the fact that the space in Asheville is getting tough. Then one
Yeah.
local theater just closed down, which is a shame. So we
Hmm.
didn't have that many to begin with.
Right.
Also, one last thing you mentioned about the second play And talk about your tie into music, because I heard kind of a theme here that you do a lot of things with music, or you have an interest in music.
Hmm.
Were you or are you a musician as well?
I refer to myself as a retired musician. I played music to get myself through college, and I have a great love for jazz and world music and all things like that. Most of my plays, I like to think of music as an extra character. So if a two-person show, music is the third character in the show. And very often I will work with a live musician on stage to get that going. And I've done shows with full bands on stage. I don't do musicals. I have to say this will probably alienate some people, but I'm not a fan in general of musicals. But music is a very important part of it. I've had music written for shows, and like I said, I had musicians on stage. And in my previous life, in that other state, I produced a jazz series called Jazz on Edge, where I like to spotlight local musicians and let the mass audience know that they live there, that there's great musicians right where you are, and you can see them and have an audience for these musicians. So I've always had a great passion for music and for presenting it.
What instrument did you play?
I played guitar. I
Okay.
still play harmonica, but I haven't picked up a guitar in a long time.
Okay, but you picked up a harmonica that you can pick up.
I've got a dozen right behind me here.
Okay, mine was the kazoo. That was about my specialty. Uh,
There you go. It takes a
uh,
certain talent for that and good lips.
yeah, as a kid, I played the trumpet. I remember
Aha.
as soon as I got to college, I pawned it and never played it again. So that was, and I played all through. As a kid, I played all a lot of years, but
Right.
to get some quick cash, that was the goal. Anyway,
I hope you
Joseph,
got good bucks for it.
who knows? But anyway, last question. If folks want to
Yes.
keep track of you, so you can do it through ACT, through these two upcoming shows. But if they want to find out what you're doing, you're writing, is there a best way to find out about you?
Hayesplays.com. HAYESPLAYS.com. That's
Anyway,
me.
Joseph, it was a pleasure to have you as guest mate on this edition of the Blaine's World webcast. Also, like to thank my producer, Capita Setti, and I look forward to actually, I met you once, but I look forward to seeing you again at hopefully both those two plays in July. Thanks, man.
Thank you, Blaine. I look forward to it. Thanks so
Okay,
much.
appreciate it.